Well, hello everyone. We are back here with Rhino 7, and today I'm going to show you some kind of general techniques for making designed objects. And so we've learned a few of those techniques already in the first and second videos, but we're gonna make specific objects. Like we're gonna say, oh, let's make a table or let's make a lamp. And in doing that, we're going to move through both the process of kind of moving from concept to design, and then we're also going to think about ways that you can use different functions in Rhino to create different types of shapes. So without further ado, we're here in our document from last time where we left off. And we could certainly just delete the objects and, sort of, if we're not using them, and, have sort of a blank canvas. So we could try that. By the way, this would be a great time for me to show you a little trick in Rhino, which a lot of people don't know about, but it's pretty useful. If you select something, moving your cursor from press and go from the left to the right, it's going to collect everything that's within the cursor. If we try to partially select something, notice that it only selected the objects that were completely within the boundaries of the box that you drew. Okay, so let me show you that again. So in other words, if we don't completely encompass this shape on the side, it's not going to select it. Okay? If you drag from the left to the right, it will select objects that it is partially touching. So it seems like a really minor thing, but it's super useful. So anyway, now you know about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a new document just to kind of run through the process of doing it. And let's see. New document. Sorry, I'm a little crunchy today. It's been quite a week. So we're going to get this little startup window thing, or in this case, since we set our preferences, it's going to go straight to just an untitled document. Now, what I would potentially check on before I get carried away, kind of drawing stuff in here, is I would particularly if you're designing objects that you want to be a certain size, I would just take a quick trip to settings and investigate the grid. And so it seems like in this case, we can kind of surmise from looking at the grid that our units are in inches. So if that's what you want, that's great. Again, I won't judge if you want to work in the metric system. You have the option to do that over here in units. If, a grid line count of 200 is fine. And what we're looking at here is basically a quadrille grid. So we have a minor grid line. I can show you that right here. One of these pale grid lines every 1/4 inch, and then we have a major grid line, which are the lines that you can see when you're really zoomed out. We could see those from sort of, from far away, and those are 1-inch lines. We also have our snap spacing right now set to 0.25 inches. So when we activate this feature known as grid snap, it will toggle between these minor grid points. I think that's pretty cool for now. I would potentially think about putting the snap size down to maybe 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch if you're working on an extremely small object. But in this case, we're going to work on like furniture-sized objects. So this is great. So again, I think that that's just kind of a good practice to kind of like make sure that you know what's up with your units and what kind of world you're in. Also, I haven't mentioned this before, but the show grid lines box. Yes, please. We are definitely using the grid. So we want to show it, and the grid axes are these lines. I think you should show them because they are kind of important. They help you know where the 0, 0 of your world coordinates are. So yeah, great. So we can close this and just get going. So I think today we're going to, and you can see already I'm moving my my grids around just out of habit. I'm going to close this view for now. So if I move my window up just a tiny bit, which I kind of wanted to do anyway, if I click this button, I can get rid of that stuff on the right sidebar. It's a bit early in my drawing to start messing around with layers and stuff like that, but we'll get there. So I might add, like, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds to this video by drinking coffee. I apologize. So I think the first thing that we're going to start with is the idea of making, we're going to make one of the more simple objects that we make. We're going to start with a table. So what is a table? Well, I mean, you know, obviously we can look at pictures of tables on the internet. That's a great way to kind of get design inspiration, is to just Google table, and you could even Google like table styles, and you know, you might come up with a lot of different ways of conceptualizing a table. I'm just going to sketch out on paper, and I'm going to show it to you, the type of table that I think I want for this demo. I think we're going to make like a traditional sort of like, looks like a desk-sized table. And I'm going to draw my table in perspective, and my drawing skills are not, you know, like super amazing, so maybe this is a good way for you to see like how bad drawing can still lead to decent design. So this is what I have so far, right? It's like just, there's a top and then there's some legs. And we can certainly kind of maybe fill in some detail. I hear your mind asking this question right now. Do I have to draw it on paper? That's like so retro. No, not at all. You absolutely don't have to draw it on paper. You can use a tablet. You can use Adobe Illustrator. This is just for me, the quickest, most immediate way to do it. And in fact, when I'm doing my own stuff, I actually use Adobe Illustrator as a drawing tool, or even Adobe Photoshop. You can draw with a stylus or on a tablet with Photoshop. So what I want to kind of like figure out is like, okay, I'm gonna move the camera a little bit. Of this table, you know, we've got a couple of different parameters. We've got this sort of top. Does the top have any thickness? In other words, is it kind of big and chunky, or is it rounded? We also have the legs. You know, what's going on with the legs? The legs could be kind of, you know, totally rounded and weird, or they could be kind of svelte and kind of svelte and spindly. So those are the kinds of things that you might want to just like brainstorm, you know, in a format that you can actually draw in. If you can't draw, don't worry. I am, like I said, not really actually that great at drawing, and a lot of times I do my brainstorming straight in Rhino. I just wanted to kind of show you that as an option of things that you can do. So if you are comfortable with drawing, it can be a useful way to kind of just pre-conceptualize what you want to do before you kind of get into Rhino. So now that we have some basic parameters, like we have, okay, it's a desktop table, it's going to be at person height. So I'm sitting right now at, I'm going to pause the video for just 1 second. I'm going to get my measuring tape. Okay, so yeah, we're going to use this to just like measure the height of any table. So we have a reference point. And actually this table that I'm working at right now seems like a pretty good size. So this one's about 48 in the long ways. And then this way, it's about 2 feet. So 48 by 2 feet are the dimensions of the top. Okay, let's get busy in Rhino. So, so the first thing we're going to do, and you'll notice we're working in the top view right now, and that's because we're going to kind of set the footprint for this object. So we can start just by making a rectangle. That's not too bad. So we're going to use the corner to corner method because that's the easiest one. And we are going to make it, as promised, 2 feet by 4 feet. Now, we could certainly do, as we have been for a couple of things, and just kind of eyeball it on the grill. Sorry, that's my spring brain working there, thinking about grilling. We could spot it on the grid, but instead, I think it's probably this is enough, large enough thing that we can just specify it by typing it in. So it looks like, okay, other corner or length, we can make that 24, and then it asks for the other dimension, and we're going to make that 48. Sorry, and then width. Whoops. I should have hit enter there. Let's do that one more time. So for the first corner, I actually, in this case, I think I want the first corner to go at 0, 0. So I could either just click it. I think I'll do that. I have grid snap enabled, by the way. I'm also going to enable ortho right now, and I'll tell you why in a second. So I'm going to click in the center here, and then it asks for the other corner or length, which in this case is 24, and then the width is 48. So that's pretty straightforward to also, just type these things in. And then what we end up with is, a shape that's exactly the dimensions that we specified. So there's our sort of basic tabletop. Now, if we're thinking about, the idea that this table is going to have legs, we're still kind of a long way away from where we might think that it would have legs. But in the spirit of sort of sketching things out, I think it's a really good idea to kind of note things, make notations of things, where you might put things before you actually go to make them or build them. So in this case, we know that we want the legs, somewhere near the corners, right? But maybe not right on the corners. It turns out that there is a function in Rhino for drawing a reference path, or a curve, all the way around inside of an object at a certain distance from the curves that are already there. And so if you go to curve, the curve menu, and then curve offset, you can offset, so we're going to create a curve within a curve, just to use as a reference point for where those legs might go. And in this case, the side to offset, it can either be on the outside or the inside. We want to go for the inside. The distance in this case is set to 1, and I think I want my legs to be a little bit further in. And so, in other words, for the tabletop to have a little more overhang. So we can maybe set it to 4, just see what that looks like. If you sorry, I'm clicking like a crazy person today. If you just click in another box, it will sort of absorb the new input value, which we changed to 4. And so we just want to go inside. I think so. Basically, what we get now are these curves that we can use as references to sort of space out the legs, right? And this is a really common technique for any type of object to kind of draw on, the sort of wireframe view to get some reference points for where you want stuff, instead of just like kind of approaching it cold and saying, I want it about there. That's an incredibly imprecise way to draw. So, oh man, sorry. So then you click inside the object. Woo! Doing great today. So let's see. From here, we have these lovely little corners that we can use as points to maybe start something regarding the legs. So that's pretty useful. We probably also want to go ahead and we could go ahead and extrude the tabletop to make it an actual tabletop. One thing that we might want to consider doing is rounding off the corners. And so there's a couple of ways to do that in Rhino. You can actually make a rounded rectangle. So we could go ahead and do that. That's kind of fun. We want the regular rounded rectangle. So the first corner of the rectangle, we can actually use the existing rectangle to kind of model it. The other corner is over here. And then it's going to ask us for like a radius on the you know, amount of rounding that we have. And so right now you can see that the value here is set at 1, which would be like that. That's pretty subtle. I would maybe do it like one more click just to make sure everyone knows that you have a rounded tabletop. And so that's great. So now we have that. You may notice that we're building up some kind of redundant curves here. And that's totally fine. That's where the layers palette comes in. And also, I would call these working curves. In other words, there are curves that are going to turn into other things. So we're not going to worry too much about whether we've got like one curve overlapping on another, because, you know, and also curves in the rendering, you can make them disappear. So I am a huge fan of drawing things out with curves ahead of time. That's kind of the way you do it. So anyway, it's a way you can do it. So we don't technically need this this rectangle anymore. I have a feeling though that we might need it later. So this is where I start to use the layers palette. And so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the layers palette. Notice that at this point I'm pretty much ignoring the right view. So here's the layers palette. We haven't really talked about it yet, but when you're drawing stuff, it's useful because you can't really make things invisible in Rhino without using the layers palette. So you can see right now that we're on the default layer, and that if we went over to layer 1 by toggling this button, we can then make the default layer invisible. Whoa. Why would you want to do that? Well, you would want to do that potentially because you actually need to see something that is behind something else, or you may not be able to get to something because something else might be in front of it. That's kind of a common issue in Rhino once you get your file built up. So the more stuff that you have in your file, the more likely it is that you're going to need to use layers. So I'm going to jump back on to the default layer, and I'm going to take this this curve right here. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to right click or control click on layer 1, and I'm going to change object layer. Now, by doing this, I've gone ahead and basically gotten rid of it. I have sort of stowed it away in layer 1, and that is totally fine. That's like a reasonable thing to do. I'm going to actually rename layer 1 by double clicking here. I'm going to name this build curves. And the reason that I have a sort of practice of saving my build curves is Well, you may ask yourself, what if I make this and I hate it and I want to go back to that rectangle? Well, you can. You can bring it back. You can bring it back by doing that. So that's why. It's just to allow yourself some flexibility later on. So now, after all this, I think we could probably move ahead with extruding this sort of tabletop thingy. And there's a couple of other objects, hopefully, that we'll get to make. I'm going to make this tabletop like pretty simply. So we're going to just kind of get some, some basics down, and then I have a kind of laundry list of other functions that we need to look at in this video. Okay, so we want to extrude the tabletop. Well, what do we know about this curve? For one thing, it appears to be planar, so that's good. We are looking for like an actual kind of slab with a top and a bottom. That sounds like a solid to me. So in other words, we're looking for a solid. So I'm going to go to the solid menu, and there is a extrude planar curve function. So I'm going to extrude that planar curve straight, meaning just straight up. And I'm going to zoom in just a tiny bit here. And yeah, sure, I could type it in over here, but I like to kind of see it. So this would be a 2-inch thick tabletop. That's like a very chunky tabletop. We could do like a 1.5, and that's a little less chunky. So now that I have this thing in my in solid form, I'm going to go ahead and try to change the rendering method here. I'm going to put it on ghosted right now. And then you can see, great, it's sort of, it's chunky, and I use that as a, by the way, I use that word as a sort of like, compliment. Like if you've got a giant slab of wood, it's usually pretty expensive, and it's, sort of has this like aura of like handcrafted from a tree. And so, but it's not, it doesn't look like it's about to go like, when you put stuff on it. But it's also not like, King Henry VIII, could have eaten on this table. It's so, so, massively thick, like, like a 4 or 5 inch table slab. So this seems like a kind of like contemporary, more modern, sort of like, proportion. So let's, move to making the legs at this point, and this will be just fine. So we want to, I think starting with some kind of rounded leg would be kind of nice. I usually don't do rounded legs, but we have to keep something going here. So if we go to make a circle, and we can use one of these points. Now, if you can't use one of these points, may I suggest that you go down here, make sure Smart Track is enabled, and then enable these things. We're going to start using the snaps. And what the snaps allow you to do is that they allow you to literally snap to a point within the design, which is super, super helpful. In fact, I would say it's essential. So we're going to just snap to this point. And probably when we're thinking about the radius of this circle, I had drawn, like here, the table leg is thick at the top and it gets thinner at the bottom. So we can certainly stick around with that logic. So we want it to be relatively thick here. So if you want a sort of like more zoomed out reference, you can certainly kind of put this into the mix so you can kind of see it. That looks pretty decent. It's still got a certain amount of overhang from the tabletop, right? I don't know if you've ever like kicked your knees on a table. That's a terrible table design. But okay, so now that we have this, we can do one of two things. We can go ahead and distribute this to all four corners, or we can just make one table. This is how design is, efficient. We can just make one table leg and copy it to all four of the places that we're going to. So in general, some people think that copying is a bad thing, but in design, and particularly in three-dimensional design, it's kind of like a vital tool. So you wouldn't want to design the same thing 4 times. That would be absurd, especially if it were the same. So let's go ahead and get this table leg to kind of where we want it, and then we're gonna distribute it to the other 4 places, and then we'll have a table. And we might still do some other things, but we'll see. Okay, so to kind of move this up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this circle, and again, with the table leg, we really want a solid, right? So what do we know about this curve? It is planar for sure, meaning that it's not like this, which that's not planar. That would not help us right now. So, okay, I'm done breaking things. And I think we can just go to the solid menu and extrude planar curve, but wait, we're going to use the taper function. So, tapered will do exactly what it says on the tin. It's going to create a taper. So in this case, I'm going to actually prioritize my front view. So, because I need to see this sort of dimension of the table. Now actually would be a great time to measure the height of my table. I can give you a hint. It's going to be somewhere around between 35 and 40 inches. So let's see if I'm right. Nope, it's a little short. It's a short table. It's about 29 inches. So that's great. So let's go ahead and set that, because it's just kind of a standard thing, right? Table heights are, if you're really bored one day, go around the house, measure all your tables. They're going to be within a couple of inches of each other. And so for extrusion distance, we can just type in 29, and that's going to be our sort of, it's going to be our dimension. Let me bring that back. So let's go ahead and put 29 in here. Where we specify the draft angle, we need to go ahead and specify that parameter because there's a done button here. We have to actually click that button, but we have to kind of fill in all this stuff. So 29 is about how far we want it to go, and that's going to be about there. Now, right now we have a draft angle, and it looks like it's way too pointy. That's like, I don't know, like Wicked Witch of the West table or some, table leg. So if we just start experimenting by dropping that number, so let's try maybe 3, then you can see by the time we get around to 25, it looks like it still is not going to be standing on a point, right? That's not very, I mean, it could be cool for, artistic purposes, but that's not, I'm trying to make a table here. So, okay, that's great. And corners sharp, delete input, no, we want to keep our input. And that's great, we can just click done. And so then that causes our table leg to appear. Now, there's one thing that we want to do here to kind of adjust things, and that is that right now our table leg appears sort of lodged inside our tabletop, and that's because for no reason at all I extruded the tabletop up, and then I also extruded the table leg up. So we could do one of two things. We could re-extrude the table leg and make it go down from the surface. That actually might be the best thing to do. We could also move the table leg up and then flip everything over. I think I'm actually going to move the table leg up and flip everything over just to illustrate how to do those things. Even though if it may actually be the most direct way, might be to just take this curve and extrude it down. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move the table leg to the surface that I actually want it to be touching. So let's go ahead and we're going to use the move tool, which we have used in previous videos. So the point to move from in this case, well, that could be a couple of different things. I would suggest, and this is where, maybe actually using your perspective view is not a terrible thing, trying to snap to this original point, which is the origin point of the sort of round, round circle. So we're going to move from there. And right now I have ortho enabled, which is really key in operations like this, because with ortho enabled, I can just pop straight up, and I can, I'm going to disable this perpendicular thing. So I can pop straight up, and you can see it's saying, hey, this is the apparent intersection. This is probably what you want. And obviously, yeah, it is what I want, so that's great. If I don't have ortho enabled, let me just show you, crazy difficult things are going to present themselves. Which, this is great if you want to move something, all over the screen. But in this case, we just want to have a very specific movement where we're moving something just a little bit up. So having ortho on is very, very helpful. Okay, so I think before I flip a table, and that's one of my favorite things to do when I'm teaching, metaphorically, of course. That's an attempt at humor, by the way. I'm going to take this and go ahead and replicate it so that when we flip the table, it's just, it's done, basically. So we're going to sort of build it upside down. And let's see, it looks like, I'm checking just real quickly to see, maybe my move didn't take. Or, more likely, it looks like we have a couple iterations of the same object. Let me just try moving this one more time. So that is the same object. If it weren't the same object, it would fly up with a little menu. Point to move from. Yes, please. Okay. Okay, so there. It did it that time. I must have just been spazzy with my clicks. That would never happen. So now we want to make this table leg into 4 table legs. And so we want to use one of my very favorite functions in Rhino. It's called the copy function. And so you click the copy function, you select the objects to copy, you hit enter, and then it gives you a point to copy from. So in this case, I think the point to copy from should probably be this this reference point right here. Although, if we wanted to be super specific, we could identify the center of this. This is fine. It's going to just copy it's a reference point, so it's going to add in the vertical distance that this object is from it. Let's go ahead and use the center snap just to make it like really direct and obvious. And we can actually use the center of this object by using the center snap. So the center snap freaks people out, by the way, because you don't actually hit the center by pointing the mouse at the center. Often you have to kind of hover around the edges until it finds the center. So that can be frustrating for people. So you got to just be patient and kind of move the mouse around and let it find the center. So now I'm gonna work in top view for this. Now we've got a good sort of like reference point. So except it seems to be a bit off right now. Do that one more time. Select objects to copy. Here we go. Now, again, when it's clicking here on the center, I just want to click, and I just want to kind of like observe and make sure that that point is actually on the place that I want it. So here I can see that it is actually on the center. So sometimes you might get unpredictable results, and it's that you've selected the wrong reference point. So then you click on the points that you want to move it to, and you click done. And now we have a table that is worthy of flipping. Hello. Thank you. So we could certainly go ahead and flip this table. There's one other like little detail thing that I want to do to this table. I want to take this and I want to go ahead and make another offset for it. What we're going to do is we're going to make what's called a privacy skirt, or a skirt in general. If you're a furniture nerd, I guess this would make sense, but it doesn't really have to. So I think we can just go like 0.75 inches thick. I'm going to have it go in on the interior here. And I can take these two curves now and extrude a planar curve straight. Notice, by the way, that when you extrude two planar curves that are inside of each other, it makes a hole, right? It makes this sort of cavity. So that's actually what we want. I'm going to bring up the front view so I can just get that kind of side perspective here. And I'm just going to make this a couple of inches. And that is sort of traditionally added to tables to give them a little structural stability. So now we have this table that is very much upside down, and we need to flip it. So we can do a couple of things. The first thing that I would recommend after you get an object that is sort of done like this is to, and it looks like actually we have an issue here with one of the table legs. Interesting. I'm going to just make sure that these table legs are all at the same level. It looks like when I copied them, one of them might be a little bit different. Ah, I see what happened. So it looks like when I snapped to the point, so I'm going to hit the Shift key and just select all three of these, and I'm going to use the Move tool and just pop these up. And now, oh look, they're all the same. There's no little weirdness here. So that's not super big deal, but that's just, you know, having that confusion of like, what are you actually snapping to? If you find yourself in a situation where that is causing confusion, because it can, the best thing you can do is to just take that, like, so the curve that this curve that we made way back when, we could actually just transport that curve to here by changing the object layer. And now it's gone. It's not going to be like, your mouse is not going to be snapping to it anymore. So that's one of the reasons why sometimes you want to like get rid of things, because they're you know, causing confusion with your snaps, just as well as maybe you might not be able to see things. So, okay, if we want to flip this table, and as I was saying, you might want to think about doing this with everything that you make, kind of after you make it, because you may, hopefully, for the second assignment, you'll be making multiple objects. For the first assignment, you'll only be making one object. But let's say you get this object done, and it's like the most beautiful thing you've ever made. You're so proud of it. And then, you know, you come in the next day, and you're like that. And you're like, oh my God, I messed it up. It's going to happen. So how can you prevent that from happening? The best way that you can prevent yourself from messing up something that you already made, that you like, is by taking the whole object, selecting the entire thing, and using this function. It's called the group function. And so now that this is grouped, we can only select it as like a single entity. Like in Photoshop and other apps, grouping is totally reversible. You can ungroup things by clicking over here if you want to get back into them. But for the most part, grouping things is really essential, especially if you're building a scene, which I know in our second assignment we're asking you to have a scene. And even if it's a more complicated object, you probably still want to have groups of things. So for example, I could, if I wanted to, I could group all the legs once I know that they're at the right height, right? Then I could just group them and nobody's going to mess with them. So yeah, grouping in general, I think is a really good practice. And it's really helpful when you're working with files that are starting to get a little complex. So time to flip the table. So what we're going to do is we are going to use the rotate function. We're going to select objects to rotate. Because this is grouped, we only have to just kind of click and select it. Plus press enter. Yes, okay. Center of rotation. I would say that the center of rotation in this case could probably be the edge of this table. We may have to move it up or down later when we get our sort of scene or our room created. This is fine for now. So, and then it gives you, what's the angle? Well, so when it asks for the angle, it's not asking for the angle that you want to rotate it at. It's asking for the angle that it is at right now. Like, what's the reference angle or the reference point? And so in most cases, that's going to be a straight horizontal line. Or a straight vertical line. So, as promised, here's our straight over. You could make it like that if you wanted to. Well, not on the object, but you could make it short. It doesn't have to be long. I like to make it long, mostly because when you throw out the point longer than the object, it just is like extra insurance that you're not going to snap to the object, or that you're not going to, you know, have a sort of situation where you're snapping to something that doesn't make any sense. If it's past the object and into the grid, it's just going to be on a straight line by default. Okay, and then it says second reference point. Well, you want to flip the table. So you just take it and you either go this way or that way, doesn't matter. And your second reference point is sort of where it needs to go in order to actually be rotated to your satisfaction. So, and then press enter. In this case, I had the copy function on when I rotated. I didn't notice. Let me show you again. So this little copy button is kind of awesome because, check it out, you can do things like this. Notice, by the way, that I'm in ortho mode right now, so it's only clicking to like 90-degree points. I'm going to turn ortho off, actually, so I can do a little more freestyle here. So we're going to make like a little table explosion. So, okay, so we have copy enabled right now. So copy is actually like a really powerful tool for, you know, making cool, complex forms. I love using copy as a way to just kind of like make repeated forms. But that's not really what we're doing. I think I might save this. So I'm gonna do my side select here. I think I'm gonna save this little table symphony here, maybe for later. Table splah. And I'm going to put it in here, change object layer. And now it's like it never happened. So that's nice. Now, you may be asking yourself at this point, like, if we make a scene or a room, like with a floor and walls and other stuff, do I need to have the table at a certain level? And the answer is, well, yeah, at some point we will need to do that. That point is not right this moment, though. We can just leave the table as it is for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just select the table. I'm going to also make a layer called table. Oh, spelling is in good shape today. And I'm going to move that on that layer. You can of course change the colors if you don't like the colors. And I think I'm going to go ahead and make another simple object while we have time. So one thing that is pretty useful is the idea of the rail revolve, and we did already look at the rail revolve before. One thing that I want to show you is sort of like a different level onto using something like a rail revolve. So a lot of people ask me, like, how do I make an object hollow? Well, let's get a rail revolve. Let's get a simple kind of rail revolve going. And again, I'm just sort of like making random curves here, like there's no real intention. Okay, so now we know how to make a revolve. We've done that in the last video, and that's where you take this curve and you just spin it and you get a solid shape, right? There's a couple of methods that we haven't looked at yet related to revolving that are super cool. So one is the so-called rail revolve. And when you use the regular revolve method, it assumes that you have a circle as your rail, that it's just a moving around the axis of something. Well, we can certainly make a sort of more complex curve. So I'm going to use the bottom of this sort of profile as the place to start the curve. I'm going to draw it in the opposite view because I want it to be like perpendicular. I want the shape to be perpendicular. And this is going to get a little weird. I'm going to give it like a kind of weird, blobby blobby wobbly shape. Okay, so there it is. It looks like at some point I made a little screw up and it's not coplanar. So I'm just going to investigate that because it does need to be planar. So that's not a big deal. It's an easy fix. It happens a lot. I don't have the planar box checked, so that's probably why. But anyway, all you have to do is just bump this up to snap up to a planar point. And so now we could take this object and do what's called a rail revolve. So the profile curve is this one. The rail curve is this one. The start of the rail revolve axis, we want that to kind of like go around the center-ish. We'll just use 0, 0. And then the end of the rail revolve axis, I do kind of want it to be straight up and down, so clicking ortho in this case would be a helpful way of making that happen. And so you can see a couple things have happened. One, we got a shape that was way less regular looking, like it's looks way less machined. Another thing that happened is we got a surface like you would through a rail without sort of like getting any sealed top or bottom. So what we could do to make this a solid, I'm going to show you something fun. So you can make this a solid by going to the solid menu and just using the cat planar holes function. And at this point, it's a solid. So it's just basically, it's like, hello, I'm blob, hear me roar. Now, if you want to turn this blob into, let's say, a vase or into a form that people can like enter or an object that'll hold things, you can certainly do that. You can use what's called the shell command. And it says, I usually type it in, it says select faces to remove from closed polysurface. Okay, well I want to remove the top. This is the top. I'm going to escape out of that because it just really quickly kind of didn't select. There we go. Just that one face. Thickness is too large for this polysurface. Okay, so, that's why. So the thickness parameter, right now it was set to 1, and 1 unit is 1 grid unit here. So I would actually maybe set it to something like 0.1 in this environment. And then we're going to select this polysurface. And it says it's not solid, but we don't really care. And so then what you end up with, which is kind of fun, is a sort of, a shell that has an actual inner wall. So you can use this this method even for stuff that's not weird. You can use the method for for a cylinder if you really wanted to, although there's a cylinder function. You can use it for anything that you create with a sort of plane surface. So we're running out of time on this video. I want to go ahead and move on. In the next video, I'm just going to be going over various techniques to kind of create objects. And what we're doing is we're sort of leading towards thinking about making objects for both your first assignment and your second assignment. So I'm kind of trying to show you some general techniques. And, you need to, it's your sort of responsibility to provide the inspiration to sort of to figure out, like what kind of like futuristic, mind control apparatus this might be. But I think certainly all that we're asking for is just some simple objects for the first assignment with a dash of imagination. So I'll see you all in a little while, and have a wonderful time until then. Thanks.